The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor, like her dreams had 6 months ago. Elena Vasquez froze, her trembling fingers still extended where the crystal had slipped from her grasp. Around her, the glittering elite of Manhattans. Upper East Side turned in slow motion, their conversations dying as they registered the catastrophe unfolding before them. The golden liquid spread across the pristine white floor of the Blackstone penthouse, seeping toward designer shoes that cost more than Elena's monthly rent? You incompetent little peasant. Victoria Blackstone's voice cut through the silence like a blade. The socialite's face contorted with rage, her Botox-smoothed features struggling to express the full depth of her fury. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Elena's throat constricted. She knew exactly what she'd done. She'd just destroyed her last chance at keeping food on the table for her and her dying father. Mrs. Blackstone, I'm so sorry. Please, let me clean. Don't you dare touch anything else. Victoria's manicured finger stabbed toward Elena like a weapon. Security. Remove this trash from my home immediately. The word trash hit Elena like a physical blow. Round her faces she'd served for months looked on with cold amusement. These people who'd smiled when she'd brought them canapes, who'd complimented her discreet service, watched her humiliation with the detached fascination of Romans at the Colosseum. From the corner of her eye, Elena caught sight of him. Damien Cross stood apart from the crowd, his dark suit impeccable, his steel-gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin burn. At 34, he was Manhattan's most ruthless corporate raider, a man who'd built his empire on the bones of failed companies. She'd served him countless times over the past year, always careful to avoid his penetrating gaze, always aware of the dangerous energy that seemed to radiate from him like heat from a flame. Now those eyes held something she couldn't decipher. Not pity, not amusement, but something darker, more complex. You pathetic little nobody, Victoria continued, her voice rising to ensure the entire room could hear. Girls like you think you can infiltrate our world, but you'll always be exactly what you are, nothing. Elena's cheeks burned with shame, but she forced herself to stand straighter. She wouldn't give these people the satisfaction of watching her crumble completely. Not when her father was lying in a hospital bed, counting on her to pay for the treatment that might give him a few more precious months. I said remove her. Victoria shrieked when the security guards hesitated, but before they could move, Damien's voice sliced through the chaos like silk over steel. It won't be necessary. Every head turned toward him. He moved through the crowd with predatory grace, his presence commanding attention without effort. When he reached Elena, he didn't look at her. Instead, his gaze swept over the assembled guests with cold calculation. Victoria, darling, he said, his tone deceptively casual. Making scenes at charity functions is so terribly gauche, don't you think? What would the Times Society page say? Victoria's face flushed purple. I mean, you can't possibly be defending. This young woman has been providing excellent service at these events for over a year. His voice carried the quiet authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. One accident hardly warrants such theater. Lena stared at him in shock. Why was he defending her? In all their brief interactions, he'd never shown her anything but professional indifference. Damien finally looked down at her, and the contact of his gaze sent electricity racing through her veins. That's Vasquez, isn't it? Perhaps you should take a moment to compose yourself. He knew her name. How did he know her name? I should go. Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. I'll pay for the damage, Mrs. Blackstone. Whatever it costs. Victoria's laugh was sharp and cruel. With what money, darling? Everyone knows your father is dying in some charity ward. You can barely afford the bus fare to get here. The words hit Elena like a slap. How did Victoria know about her father? How did any of them know about her private struggles? Enough. Damien's voice dropped to a whisper, but somehow it carried more weight than Victoria's shouts. The room fell silent. You've made your point, Victoria. Now drop it. Something in his tone made the socialite step back, her fury momentarily tempered by what looked like fear. Damien turned back to Elena, and for a moment, she thought she saw something almost human flicker in those cold gray eyes. Go home, miss. Vasquez. Take care of what matters. Elena nodded mutely, gathered what remained of her dignity, and walked toward the exit. Behind her, conversations gradually resumed, but she could feel Damien's gaze following her like a weight between her shoulder blades. Outside in the hallway, as the elevator doors closed on the glittering world she'd never truly belonged to, Elena finally allowed herself to cry. Not just for the job she'd lost, or the money she desperately needed, but for the crushing realization that no matter how hard she worked, how much she sacrificed, she would always be seen as nothing more than trash to be swept away. What she didn't know was that behind those penthouse windows, Damien Cross was making a phone call that would change everything. Marcus, I need you to arrange something for me. Quietly. 3 days after the catastrophe at the Blackstone penthouse, Lena sat in the sterile waiting room of Mount Sinai Hospital, staring at the medical bill that would destroy what remained of her family's future. The numbers blurred together through her exhausted tears. Even with insurance, her father's treatment would cost more than she could earn in 5 years. The late afternoon sun slanted through grimy windows, casting long shadows across cracked linoleum floors. Around her, other families waited with the same hollow-eyed desperation, all of them trapped in the same impossible equation of love versus money. Elena Vasquez? She looked up to see a man in an expensive charcoal suit approaching, silver at his temples, with the kind of polished confidence that came from never having to check his bank balance. He extended a business card, embossed with gold lettering. Marcus Chen, attorney for Cross Enterprises. Mr. Cross would like to speak with you. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd heard whispers about Damien Cross's legendary ruthlessness, how he destroyed companies and lives with equal efficiency. What could he possibly want with her? I don't understand. What does he want? Marcus's smile was professionally neutral. He has a proposition that might interest you. A car is waiting outside. 20 minutes later, Elena found herself in the back of a black Mercedes, Manhattan's skyline sliding past tinted windows as they headed toward the financial district. She'd changed from her hospital clothes into the only decent dress she owned. A simple black number she'd bought secondhand for job interviews. The Cross Enterprises building pierced the sky like a steel and glass dagger. The elevator rose smoothly to the 42nd floor, delivering her to an executive suite that screamed power and money. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a god's-eye view of the city, while abstract art worth more than most people's homes adorned the walls. Damien stood with his back to her, silhouetted against the setting sun. He'd removed his jacket, and the white shirt molded to his broad shoulders made him look like a dangerous angel. When he turned, those steel-gray eyes locked onto hers with predatory intensity. Miss Vasquez, thank you for coming. His voice was exactly as she remembered, smooth and commanding, with an undertone that made her pulse quicken despite her fear. Mr. Cross, I don't understand why I'm here. He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her head spin. Your father is dying. The blunt statement hit her like a punch to the gut. How do you know that? I make it my business to know things. He circled her slowly, like a predator evaluating prey. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. 3 months, maybe 6 if he gets the experimental treatment at Johns Hopkins. But that costs money you don't have. Elena's hands clenched into fists. What do you want? Damien stopped directly in front of her, so close she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. I want to make you an offer. I don't have anything you could possibly want. His smile was sharp and predatory. You're wrong about that. Moved to his desk, pulled out a leather folder, and handed it to her. Inside was a contract, the legal language dense and intimidating, but the numbers at the bottom made her gasp. $2 million, he said casually, as if discussing the weather. Enough to pay for your father's treatment, plus enough left over to secure your future? Elena's hand shook as she stared at the contract. What do I have to do?
Harry.
Me. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Elena stared at him, certain she'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? You and me? Legally binding for 1 year, after which we'll divorce quietly, and you'll walk away $2 million richer. This is insane. Why would you want to marry? Someone like me? Damien's eyes darkened. Someone like you? Explain what you mean by that. Heat flooded Elena's cheeks. You know what I mean? I'm nobody. I'm a waitress from Queens who can barely make rent. You're Damien Cross. You could have any woman you want. Perhaps, but I don't want any woman. I want you. The way he said it made something dangerous coil in her belly. Why? He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze never leaving her face. Let's just say I have my reasons. The question is, are you willing to save your father's life? Elena looked down at the contract again. The numbers seemed to swim on the page. There has to be a catch. Men like you don't just give away millions out of the goodness of their hearts. Men like me. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You seem to have a lot of opinions about what kind of man I am. The kind who destroys companies for profit. The kind who ruins lives and doesn't lose sleep over it. Something flickered in his eyes, too quick for her to interpret. You're not wrong. But this isn't about profit. It's about need. What do you need from me that you can't get from one of your society girlfriends? Damien moved closer again, and this time Elena could feel the heat radiating from his body. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Those women want my money, my status, my power. You want none of those things? In fact, you seem to despise everything I represent. So you want someone who hates you? Want someone real? His hand reached out, almost touching her cheek before dropping back to his side. Someone who won't pretend to be something she's not for my benefit. Elena's breath caught. There was something raw in his voice, something vulnerable that didn't match his predatory reputation. And in return, you get what? A year of playing house with the help? His jaw tightened. Is that really what you think this is about? I don't know what to think. This whole thing is crazy. Crazy enough to save your father's life. The question hit her like a physical blow. She thought of her father lying in that hospital bed. His once strong frame wasted by disease, his eyes still bright with love for her despite the pain ravaging his body. If I say yes, what exactly would this marriage entail? You'd live in my penthouse. Attend social functions as my wife. Play the part convincingly and physically. Heat flared in his eyes. Only what you're willing to give. The answer sent electricity racing through her veins. She tried to ignore the way her body responded to his proximity, the way her pulse quickened when he looked at her like she was something he wanted to devour. I need time to think. Your father doesn't have time. His voice was gentle but implacable. The experimental treatment starts Monday, or not at all. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of an impossible choice crushing down on her. Sell herself to save the man who'd sacrificed everything for her, or watch him die, knowing she could have prevented it. When she opened her eyes, Damien was watching her with an intensity that made her feel exposed, as if he could see straight through to her soul. If I do this, she said quietly, I need your word that my father will receive the best possible care. No matter what happens between us, you have it. And after the year is over, I walk away free and clear. No strings, no obligations. Something dark flickered across his features. If that's what you want. Elena picked up the pen from his desk, her hand trembling as she stared at the signature line. 1 year of her life, in exchange for her father's survival. It should be an easy choice. So why did it feel like she was signing away her soul, Elena? Damien's voice was soft, almost tender. You don't have to do this. She looked up at him, startled by the gentleness in his tone. For a moment, the predatory mask slipped, and she caught a glimpse of something almost human beneath. Yes, I do. She signed her name with quick, decisive strokes before she could change her mind. The ink seemed to seal her fate with brutal finality. Damien took the contract, his fingers brushing hers for just an instant. The contact sent fire racing up her arm. Welcome to the family, Mrs. Cross. The Cross penthouse was a monument to masculine power and understated wealth. Elena stood in the living room 3 weeks after their courthouse wedding, feeling like an intruder in a museum. Everything was pristine, expensive, and cold as the man who owned it. Your father's responding well to the treatment. She turned to find Damien watching her from the doorway, still wearing his work clothes despite the late hour. His tie was loosened, the top button of his shirt undone, revealing a hint of the strong throat beneath. Even disheveled, he looked like he could command armies. The doctor said he might be able to come home for Christmas. Elena's voice was carefully neutral. They'd been married 3 weeks, living in the same space, maintaining the facade of domestic bliss for his staff and the society photographers who occasionally caught them together. But they were still strangers, circling each other like wary predators. Good. He moved to the bar, poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey. Drink? I don't drink, right? I forgot. He took a sip, his eyes never leaving her face. You're still afraid of me? It wasn't a question. Elena lifted her chin defiantly. Should I be? Probably. His smile was sharp-edged. I'm not a good man, Elena. I thought you understood that. You saved my father's life. For my own reasons, which you still won't tell me. Damien's jaw tightened. For weeks she'd been trying to understand why he'd chosen her. Why he'd been willing to pay so much for what was essentially an elaborate charade. The man was an enigma wrapped in expensive suits and dangerous smiles. Does it matter? It matters. To me, he studied her for a long moment, then set down his glass and moved closer. Tell me something, wife. What do you think I do when I leave here every morning? Elena frowned. Run your company, destroy other companies, make money. Good. And what do you think happens when I come home? I wouldn't know. You barely speak to me, I watch you. His voice dropped to that dangerous whisper that made her pulse quicken. I watch you read in that chair by the window. Watch you make coffee in the morning, humming under your breath. I'll watch you worry about your father, and I see the guilt in your eyes because you think you sold yourself to save him. Elena's breath caught. I didn't you? He was close enough now that she could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his body. You'd think I'm some kind of monster who bought himself a pretty plaything. Art. You. The question hung in the air between them like a blade. Damien's expression darkened, and for a moment, Elena thought she'd pushed too far. But then his phone buzzed, shattering the tension. He glanced at the screen, and his face went stone cold. We have a problem. What kind of problem? Instead of answering, he turned on the massive television mounted on the wall. The evening news filled the screen, and Elena's blood turned to ice as she saw her own face staring back at her. Damien Cross, Manhattan's most eligible bachelor, shocked the social world this month with his sudden marriage to Elena Vasquez, a former waitress from Queens, the reporter was saying. But sources close to the couple suggest this may be more than a fairy tale romance. The screen cut to a carefully edited montage of photos. Elena serving drinks at society functions, looking young and out of place. Damien at various charity events, with elegant women on his arm. And finally, the two of them leaving the courthouse after their wedding, Elena looking shell-shocked while Damien's face was a mask of controlled fury. Industry insiders speculate that the marriage may be connected to Cross's upcoming acquisition of Martinez Holdings, a deal that could net him billions, but has faced unexpected resistance from the company's board. Elena felt the blood drain. From her face, Martinez Holdings, that's your maiden name. Yes, Damien's voice was deadly quiet. Someone's done their homework. The implications hit her like a freight train. You're trying to buy my family's company? The company my grandfather built? Former family company? Your father sold his shares years ago to pay for your mother's cancer treatment. Elena stared at him, betrayal cutting through her like a knife. You knew. You knew all along. Elena, is that why you married me? To get some kind of leverage over the Martinez board. Damien's expression was unreadable. It's complicated. It's not complicated at all. She backed away from him, her voice rising. You used me. You used my father's illness to manipulate me into helping you steal what's left of my family's legacy. That's not how it was. Then how was it, Damien? Because right now it looks like you saw an opportunity to exploit a desperate woman and you took it. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. You want to know the truth? Fine. Yes, I knew about the Martinez connection. Yes, I knew marrying you would give me certain advantages in the acquisition. Each word hit her like a physical blow. Was all a lie. Not all of it. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the suddenly suffocating room. I could have found 100 other ways to get what I wanted from Martinez Holdings. I didn't need to marry you for that. Then why? Because I wanted you. The admission came out rough, almost angry. From the first moment I saw you serving drinks at that charity function, I wanted you. And when I saw you standing there in Victoria's penthouse, letting those people tear you apart rather than compromise your dignity, I knew I had to have you. Elena's head spun. So you bought me. I gave you what you needed to save your father's life. In exchange for what I could give you. Access to Martinez Holdings, a pretty wife to improve your image. What else? Damien's control finally snapped. He grabbed her arms, pulling her against him, his face inches from hers. In exchange for the only woman who's ever looked at me like I was human, instead of just a bank account with a pulse. The raw pain in his voice stunned her into silence. This close, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the loneliness he kept hidden behind his predatory masks. You want to know why I really married you, Elena? Because you're the first person in 15 years who didn't want anything from me? You despised everything I represented, and somehow that made me feel more alive than all the sycophants and gold diggers ever could. His hands gentled on her arms, his thumbs tracing small circles on her skin. I know what I am. I know what people think of me. But when you look at me, even when you're angry, even when you hate me, you see me. Not my money, not my power. Me. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. She could feel the barely leashed violence in him, the dangerous energy that made him so feared in boardrooms across the city, but she could also see the vulnerability he was trying so hard to hide. The Martinez deal, she whispered. Call it off. I can't do that. Yes, you can. What you just said is true. If you care about me at all, you'll walk away from it. Damien's grip tightened. That company destroyed 3 smaller firms when they expanded into South America. They've been cutting corners on safety regulations for years. The board is corrupt, Elena. They deserve what's coming to them. And the 1,000 people who will lose their jobs when you tear it apart, casualties of war? The cold pragmatism in his voice reminded her exactly who she was dealing with. This wasn't some misunderstood hero. This was a man who built his empire on the bones of other people's dreams. Let me go, Elena, let me go, Damien. He released her immediately, stepping back with his hands raised. The gesture should have been reassuring, but the predatory stillness in his posture suggested a wolf backing off from prey it intended to hunt later. What happens now? She asked. Now we play the game. His voice was back to its controlled, professional tone. The story is out. The speculation will only get worse. We need to present a united front. Or what? Or your father's treatment stops. Experimental drugs he's receiving cost $30,000 a week, Elena. The moment this marriage ends, so does his care. The threat was delivered with casual brutality, but Elena caught the flash of something that might have been regret in his eyes. So I'm trapped. We both are. Elena looked at the television, where the news had moved on to other stories, other scandals. Somewhere in the city, reporters were digging deeper into her past, looking for more ammunition to fuel their speculation. And somewhere else, her father was sleeping peacefully in a bed she'd bought with her soul. There's going to be a charity gala tomorrow night, Damien said quietly. The whole Manhattan elite will be there, need to be seen together, looking happy and in love. And if I refuse, you won't. His smile was sharp and knowing. Because despite what you think of me, you love your father more than you hate me. And you'll do whatever it takes to keep him alive. Elena stared at him. Hatred and something dangerously close to desire warring in her chest. He was right, and they both knew it. She was trapped in a golden cage of her own making, married to a beautiful monster who held her father's life in his hands. I'll play your game, Damien, but don't expect me to like it. I wouldn't dream of it. He moved toward the door, then paused. Elena, for what it's worth, I never meant for you to get hurt. After he left, Elena sank onto the leather sofa, her hands shaking as the full magnitude of her situation finally hit her. She'd thought she was saving her father by marrying Damien Cross. Instead, she'd walked straight into the spider's web. And now she was trapped with the most dangerous predator in Manhattan. But as she sat alone in his cold, perfect penthouse, Elena made herself a promise. She might be trapped, but she wasn't beaten. And if Damien Cross thought he could manipulate Her indefinitely, he was about to discover just how wrong he was. The game was just beginning. The Meridian Hotel ballroom glittered like a jewel box, filled with Manhattan's elite dressed in designer gowns and $1,000 tuxedos. Elena stood at Damien's side, her hand resting lightly on his arm, playing the part of the devoted wife. While cameras flashed and society reporters circled like vultures, her dress was a masterpiece of midnight blue silk that Damien had chosen himself, molding to her curves in ways that made her acutely aware of every male gaze in the room. Diamond earrings that cost more than most people's homes caught the light as she moved, and the massive wedding ring on her finger felt like a beautiful shackle. "Smile, darling," Damien murmured against her ear, his breath warm on her skin. "Look like you're attending a funeral." "Maybe I am," she replied through gritted teeth, maintaining her camera-ready smile. His hand tightened possessively on her waist. To the watching crowd, it looked like an affectionate gesture. Elena felt the warning in his grip, Mr. and Mrs. Cross. A reporter materialized beside them, microphone extended. "How are you adjusting to married life? Some people are calling it the romance of the century." Elena opened her mouth to respond, but Damien spoke first. "Every day with Elena is a gift," he said smoothly, his gray eyes burning into hers. "She's shown me what it means to love someone more than yourself." The sincerity in his voice was so perfect that for a moment Elena almost believed it herself. Almost forgot that this was all an elaborate performance designed to protect his business interests. "And you, Mrs. Cross? How has marriage changed you?" Elena felt Damien's tension, the subtle shift in his posture that suggested he was prepared to intercept whatever she might say. But instead of the cutting remark she wanted to deliver, she found herself speaking from a place of painful honesty. "It's taught me that love and trust aren't always the same thing," she said quietly. "Sometimes you can feel everything for someone and still not know who they really are." The reporter's eyes lit up, sensing a story beneath the surface. But before he could follow up, Victoria Blackstone appeared beside them in a cloud of expensive perfume and barely concealed malice. "Elena, darling, you look absolutely radiant, which clearly agrees with you." Victoria's smile was razor-sharp. "Though I have to say, I was surprised by how quickly everything happened. Almost like it was planned." Damien's grip on Elena's waist tightened further. "Sometimes when you know," he said, his voice carrying a subtle warning that made Victoria's smile falter slightly. Of course, Victoria continued, undeterred. "Though I can't help but wonder what your father thinks of all this. Miguel Martinez was quite the businessman in his day. Such a shame about what happened to the family company." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. She'd known this moment would come, but she wasn't prepared for the casual cruelty in Victoria's voice, the way she wielded Elena's family tragedy like a weapon. "My father is very happy," Elena managed, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest. "Oh, I'm sure he is, especially considering his medical situation. It must be such a relief to have Damien's resources available." Victoria's eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. "Though I do wonder what he'd think if he knew about the Martinez Holdings acquisition. Such an interesting coincidence, don't you think?" The words hung in the air like poison. Around them, conversations seemed to pause as other guests sensed drama unfolding. Elena felt something snap inside her chest. The careful composure she'd maintained for weeks cracked like glass. And suddenly, she was done pretending, done playing games, done being a pawn in other people's power struggles. "You want to know what my father thinks?" she said, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet space around them. "He thinks that vultures like you are the reason good people suffer while monsters prosper." Victoria's face went white with shock. Beside her, Elena felt Damien go rigid. "He thinks that a society that worships money over compassion deserves to rot from the inside," Elena continued, her voice gaining strength. "And he taught me that dignity isn't something you can buy or steal, no matter how much power you think you have." The silence stretched like a taut wire. Elena could feel hundreds of eyes on her, could see phones being raised to record her public breakdown. She'd just destroyed whatever carefully constructed image Damien had been trying to build. But instead of anger, she felt a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in weeks, she'd spoken the truth. Victoria recovered first, her laugh sharp and cutting. How refreshing to hear such passion. But though I can't help but wonder if your husband shares your rather naive worldview. Elena turned to look at Damien. Really look at him, taking in the controlled fury in his eyes, the tension in his jaw. This was the moment of truth. Would he protect his image and throw her to the wolves? Or would he stand by the woman he'd claimed to care about? My wife, Damien said slowly, his voice carrying across the watching crowd, is the most honest person in this room. Which frankly isn't saying much. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Victoria's mouth fell open in shock. Damien's arm tightened around Elena's waist, pulling her closer to his side. She's also right about vultures. Some people seem to think that money gives them the right to attack others for entertainment. They're about to discover how wrong they are. His gaze swept the crowd with predatory precision. I trust that any photographs or recordings of this conversation will remain private. My legal team has very specific opinions about invasion of privacy. The not-so-subtle threat sent people melting back into the crowd, phones disappearing with remarkable speed. Victoria's face had gone from white to purple with rage. Can't intimidate everyone, Damien, she hissed. Watch me. His smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Elena, would you like to leave? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Together, they walked through the ballroom toward the exit, leaving whispers and speculation in their wake. The ride home passed in tense silence. Elena stared out the window at the city lights, her heart hammering as the adrenaline of confrontation faded into exhaustion and dread. She'd just sabotaged whatever game Damien had been playing. She had no idea what the consequences would be. When they reached the penthouse, Damien poured himself a drink and loosened his tie. Elena stood in the middle of the living room, still wearing her beautiful dress, feeling like she was waiting for execution. Well, he said finally, that was illuminating. Sorry, she said quietly. I know I just ruined whatever plan you had. Did you? He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. What exactly do you think you ruined? Your image? Your business dealings. It's the whole reason you married me in the first place. Damien set down his glass and moved closer, stopping just out of arm's reach. Tell me something, Elena. What do you think would have happened if you'd stayed quiet tonight? If you'd smiled and played the perfect society wife? Elena frowned. You would have gotten what you wanted from the Martinez deal, and then what? You think Victoria and her friends would have accepted you? You think they would have suddenly seen you as an equal instead of an amusing curiosity? The truth of his words hit her like a cold slap. No, he agreed. They would have kept pushing, kept testing, kept looking for ways to tear you down because that's what they do. They destroy anything that threatens their narrow little world. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. The weight of years spent navigating a world built on cruelty and competition. What you did tonight, he said softly, was to remind them that they're not untouchable. That someone with nothing to lose can still fight back. Elena stared at him. You're not angry? Angry? Damien's laugh was harsh. I'm proud of you. You stood up to the most vicious woman in Manhattan society and made her look like exactly what she is. A pathetic bully who mistakes cruelty for power. But the Martinez deal was never about you. His voice grew quiet, almost gentle. Elena, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you weeks ago. He moved to his desk, pulled out a thick folder, and handed it to her. Elena opened it with trembling fingers, scanning legal documents and financial records that made no immediate sense. What is this? Proof that Miguel Martinez never sold his shares in Martinez Holdings. Elena's blood turned to ice. What do you mean? Your father was tricked into signing over power of attorney to the board during your mother's illness. They told him it was temporary, just until the medical crisis passed. But they used it to lock him out of his own company. The document swam before Elena's eyes as the implications hit her. That's impossible. He told me he'd sold everything to pay for Mom's treatment. He believed that's what happened. The board made sure of it. They've been systematically looting the company for years, selling off assets and pocketing the profits. While your father thought he was no longer involved, Elena sank onto the leather sofa, her legs suddenly unable to support her. How long have you known? 6 months? Maybe longer? Damien's voice was carefully controlled. I started investigating Martinez Holdings as a potential acquisition target. The deeper I dug, the more irregularities I found. When I realized what had happened to your father, I knew I had to act. So you married me to get revenge on the people who destroyed my family. I married you because I fell in love with you, he said simply. The revenge was just a bonus. Elena stared at him, her mind reeling. This doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't you just tell me the truth from the beginning? Damien was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as if he was fighting some internal battle. When he spoke, his voice was raw with an emotion she'd never heard from him before. Because I was terrified you'd refuse to marry me if you knew the real reason. And I needed you to choose me, not just accept a business arrangement. But you threatened to stop my father's treatment if I left. I lied. The admission came out hoarse, almost broken. The trust fund I set up for your father's care is irrevocable. Even if you divorce me tomorrow, even if you never speak to me again, he'll receive the best medical care available for the rest of his life. Elena felt the world shift beneath her feet. Everything she'd believed about their arrangement, about him, about her own motivations, crumbled like sand. I don't understand. If the money was always secure, why did you let me think because I'm a selfish bastard who wanted to keep you? His mask of control finally cracked completely, revealing the raw vulnerability beneath. Because for the first time in my life, I found someone who made me want to be better than what I am, and I was too much of a coward to risk losing you. Lena stood up slowly, the silk dress rustling around her legs. Show me everything. Of it. Every document, every piece of evidence about what they did to my father. Elena, show me, Damien. For the next 2 hours, they sat together on his sofa while he walked her through years of financial records, forged documents, and board meeting minutes that painted a picture of systematic fraud and theft. By the time they finished, Elena's hands were shaking with rage. He stole everything, she whispered. Not just his money, his pride, his sense of purpose. They made him believe he'd failed as a provider when they were the ones who destroyed him. Yes, Damien's voice was gentle. And tomorrow, I'm going to make sure they pay for every penny they stole and every day of suffering they caused. Elena looked at him. Really looked at him, seeing past the expensive clothes and predatory reputation to the man who'd spent months planning justice for a family he'd never met. Why? She asked softly. Why do you care so much about what happened to strangers? Damien was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because 15 years ago, someone did. The same thing to my father. Stole his company, destroyed his reputation, left him to die thinking he was a failure. And I was too young, too powerless to stop it. The pain in his voice made Elena's chest ache. What happened to him? Heart attack. 3 months after he lost everything. He died believing he'd failed his family, never knowing that he'd been betrayed by people he trusted. Elena reached out instinctively, covering his hand with hers. The contact sent electricity racing up her arm, but for once she didn't pull away. I'm sorry, she said softly. I swore that day that I'd never be powerless again. That I'd build something so strong, accumulate so much power, that no one could ever destroy what mattered to me. His fingers intertwined with hers. But power without purpose is just destruction. It took meeting you to remember that, Elena. Stared down at their joined hands, her heart hammering against her ribs. What happens now? Now we finish what we started. We take back your father's company. We expose the people who stole from him, and we make sure justice is served. And after that, Damien's grip tightened on her hand. Whether you want to stay married to a monster who's spent 6 months lying to you, or whether you want to take your father and disappear somewhere I can never find you. Elena looked into his eyes, seeing the fear he was trying so hard to hide. This dangerous, powerful man was terrified that she would leave him. The realization sent heat racing through her veins. What if I want something else entirely? She asked, her voice barely audible. What do you want, Elena? She leaned closer, close enough that she could feel his breath on her skin, could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes. I want you to stop lying to me. I want you to trust me enough to tell me the truth, even when it's ugly. And I want you to Stop treating me like I'm made of glass, Lena. His voice was rough, with barely contained desire. I want my husband, she whispered against his lips. Not the mask you wear for the world. When he kissed her, it was like lightning striking. Months of tension and denial exploded between them. And Elena finally understood why she'd been drawn to this dangerous man despite every rational thought in her head. He wasn't her captor. He was her match. And together, they were going to burn down the world that had tried to destroy them both. 6 months later, Elena stood in the boardroom of Martinez Holdings, watching as FBI agents led the former board members away in handcuffs. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden light across the mahogany table. Where her grandfather had once built an empire with nothing but determination and hope, her father sat beside her in his wheelchair. His face gaunt, but his eyes blazing with vindicated fury as he watched the men who destroyed his life face justice. At last, the experimental treatment had given him more time. Precious months they'd thought were lost forever, but the cancer was still winning its slow, inevitable war. Mia, he said softly, his voice still carrying traces of the accent he'd never quite lost. I never thought I'd live to see this day. Elena squeezed his hand, feeling the fragile bones beneath paper-thin skin. Abuelo would be proud. He would, but he'd be prouder of you. Miguel's eyes found Damien, who stood by the windows with his legal team, orchestrating the final details of the company's restoration with quiet efficiency. You chose well, Elena. That man loves you more than his own life. Elena's chest tightened. In the months since their first real kiss, she and Damien had built something neither of them had thought possible. Not just passion, though the nights they spent tangled together in silk sheets left her breathless and aching for more. Not just partnership, though they'd worked side by side to expose the conspiracy that had destroyed her family's legacy. They'd built trust. The kind of bone-deep faith that came from seeing someone at their worst and choosing to love them anyway. The transfer documents are ready for your signature, Mr. Martinez. Marcus Chen approached with a leather portfolio, his expression respectfully solemn. Miguel took the pen with trembling fingers, his signature shaky but determined. With that simple act, Martinez Holdings returned to family control after 15 years of theft and corruption. What will you do with it? Elena asked. Her father's smile was tired but peaceful. Nothing. I'm too old and too sick to run a company. But you're not. Elena's eyes widened. Papa, I don't know anything about running a business. You know about fighting for what's right. You know about standing up to bullies. You know about loyalty and courage and all the things that matter more than quarterly reports. Miguel's grip on her hand tightened. And you have a husband who knows about everything else. Across the room, Damien finished his conversation with the FBI agents and moved toward them. In his charcoal suit and silver tie, he looked every inch the corporate predator he'd once been. But Elena could see the softness in his eyes when he looked at her, the gentle way he touched her father's shoulder in greeting. It's over, he said simply. The investigation is complete. The assets are being returned. The people responsible will spend the next decade in federal prison. Thank you, Miguel said, his voice thick with emotion. I know this cost you. Politically, financially, it cost me nothing that mattered. Damien's eyes found Elena's. Some things are worth more than money or power. Later that evening, they sat together on the terrace of the penthouse, watching the sun set over Manhattan. Elena was curled against Damien's side, her head on his shoulder, feeling more at peace than she had in years. Your father wants you to take over Martinez Holdings, Damien said quietly. I know. What do you think I should do? I think you should do whatever makes you happy. Elena turned to look at him. What would make me happy is working alongside my husband to build something good. Something that helps people instead of destroying them. Damien's arm tightened around her. Cross Martinez Enterprises has a nice ring to it. Very nice. Smiled, then grew serious. Damien, there's something I need to tell you. She felt his body tense. What is it? I went to see my father's oncologist yesterday. The latest scans show the tumors are shrinking faster than they expected. He might have years instead of months. Damien went very still. Elena, that's wonderful news. Why do you look so worried? Because our original agreement was for 1 year, and that year is almost up. The silence stretched between them like a Elena could hear Damien's heartbeat, could feel the careful control he was exerting over his breathing. "Are you asking for a divorce?" he said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "I'm asking what you want." "You know what I want? Just tell me anyway." Damien pulled back so he could see her face, his gray eyes burning with an intensity that stole her. "Breath. I want forever, Elena. I want to wake up next to you every morning, until we're old and gray. I want to build something beautiful with you. Have children who get your courage and your heart. I want to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve the love of the most incredible woman I've ever known." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "What if I told you that you already deserve it? What if I told you that falling in love with you was the best decision I ever made? I'd ask you to marry me." Elena laughed through her tears. "We're already married. It's not the way I want us to be. Not with contracts and conditions and lawyers drawing up terms." Damien slipped off the couch, dropping to one knee beside her. From his pocket, he pulled out a ring box, opening it to reveal a simple solitaire diamond that caught the last rays of sunlight like captured fire. "Elena Vasquez Cross, will you marry me again? It's not because you need to save your father, or because I'm bribing you with money, or because some legal document says you have to, but because you love me and I love you, and neither of us wants to spend another day apart." Elena looked down at the man who'd saved her family, protected her heart, and shown her what it meant to be truly loved. The predator was gone, replaced by someone vulnerable and hopeful and completely hers. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Damien Cross. Again and again, for as long as you'll have me." When he slipped the ring onto her finger, it felt like a promise, not of ownership or obligation, but of partnership, choosing each other freely, completely, forever. As the stars emerged over Manhattan, Elena thought about the girl who'd stood in Victoria Blackstone's penthouse almost 2 years ago, humiliated and broken and convinced she was worthless. That girl could never have imagined this moment, this man, this love that felt strong enough to move mountains. Sometimes the most beautiful stories began with the ugliest moments. Sometimes you had to lose everything to discover what truly mattered. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, love found you in the darkness and led you home. "Mrs. Cross," Damien murmured against her lips. "Mr. Cross," she whispered back, and beneath the glittering Manhattan sky, surrounded by the empire they'd built together from ashes and determination, Elena finally understood what happily ever after really meant. It wasn't about money or status or proving anything to anyone else. It was about finding someone who saw your soul and chose to love it anyway. Someone who fought beside you instead of for you. Someone who made you believe that no matter what the world threw at you, you'd never have to face it alone. 2 years later, Elena stood in the maternity ward of Mount Sinai Hospital holding her newborn daughter, while Damien sat beside her bed, his face soft with wonder as he traced their baby's tiny fingers. "She has your eyes," he said softly, "and your stubborn chin." Elena smiled down at the perfect little face. "What should we name her?" Catherine, Damien said, without hesitation. "After my mother, Catherine Elena Cross." Elena's eyes filled with tears. Perfect. Through the window, she could see her father in the hallway, talking animatedly with the nurses despite the oxygen tank he now needed. The cancer had slowed but never stopped, yet somehow he'd held on long enough to meet his granddaughter. Enough to see Elena truly happy. "He loves you, you know," she told Damien. "He told me yesterday that you're the son he never had." "He gave me something more valuable than a son could," Damien replied, his voice thick with emotion. "He gave me you." As Catherine Elena Cross slept peacefully in her mother's arms, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that terrible night in the Blackstone penthouse to this moment of perfect joy, every pain had led to something beautiful. Every loss had made room for something better. She'd learned that love wasn't about being saved by someone else. It was about saving each other, again and again, in all the ways that mattered. And in the end, made all the difference. The end asterisk, like this video. If the story touched your heart, subscribe for more emotional tales, and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. And let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.